Welcome to another episode of Medieval Peasant Facts. Today's fact: it kinda really sucked to be a peasant in the 14th century. For the simple fact that basically all the time, you were worried about dying of hunger. You may not be aware of this fact, but farming is hard. In the modern day, I think we're very insulated from that fact because technology has advanced to the point where most first world societies are food secure. Our crops are genetically modified to be both more drought and pest resistant. Our fertilizers are far more potent than what they would have had in the past. We obviously don't have to rely on manual or animal labor for mechanical tasks like plowing. And while weather still certainly plays a factor in the success of a harvest, it is not nearly as debilitating to, for example, not have rain for several weeks or several months in a year because we have more advanced irrigation systems and can bring water from further away. But in the Middle Ages, it rains too much, your crops die. It rains too little, your crops die. It rains at the wrong time, your hay's ruined. It's cold too long at the end of the winter, and now your planting's delayed, and that means your harvest is delayed, and that means that you have more of a gap between what you saved from last year to eat through this year. Historians actually have a word for this. It's called the hungry gap, and it describes a very common phenomena in historical peasant societies where you run out of food before you've gotten to the next harvest. In 14th century England, for example, this was usually cereals like grain and barley, which you harvest in the late summer or the early fall. So if in June you're running out of grain, you gotta wait like 2-3 months before you're gonna have more. For English peasants in this period, bread was the principal article of their diet. It's estimated that an agrarian laborer of this period would eat between 4 to 5 pounds of bread a day, or like 5,000 calories. Which makes sense because you're doing physical labor all day long. So imagine not having food when your job burns 5,000 calories a day. Beat up, bad time. The 14th century was a particularly bad time. We have the Great Famine of 1315 to 1317 in Western Europe. Mid-century also sucked. There was one study of the accounts of the Bishopric of Winchester, where in a 13-year span, 5 years of those 13 were outstandingly bad, which is defined by the crop yield being 15% below the average. And of those 13 years, only 2 years were outstandingly good, which again is 15% above the average. This is also reflected in the price of food, where between 1350 and 1375, 21 of those 25 years, the price of wheat was high. 2 of those 4 remaining years that were not high were very high. So those remaining 2 years, the price was low or average. So as much as the current egg crisis is kind of sobering to have kind of a food shortage in the modern era, we should thank our lucky stars that we at least have bread.